I thought that the military was probably a strong path for me. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I grow up. I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out. So we have some of our best friends that we're representing right now for a VA loan in Maryland.
Did you know him from previous business, or was it?
No, I met him in the new venture.
Okay.
Yeah, when I went on him, and I wasn't even thinking about it on my own until he and his wife brought it up.
If you decide, if you think that's the best decision you need to go with, then do it. But before, get with somebody like yourself who does really good education on the front end.
And I am here in the Birmingham area, but like you said, I do like to travel around. So
Welcome back to another episode. I've got a special guest, Mr. Thomas Holloway here. I just want to say like Holloway Mortgages, because it's about time you just kind of brand your own company.
And that's what I try to do for the most part. Try to rock the label Holloway Home Loans.
Yes, with the hat. Like, shout out, best hats in town. Truly, like, I love it. I should have worn the white. You gave me a white one. I should have worn it.
No, all good, man.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
For inviting me. This is sweet.
I'm excited to dive in to figure out who you are, because we know we've closed a couple of deals together, and I know a little bit about you. I know that your high school nickname was the Captain America, I believe, is what someone told me. Maybe it still sticks. I don't know. But yeah, so take me back. So you can go back as far as you want, but who are you? Where'd you come from? How'd you get where you are?
Yeah, so I came from here originally. So I was born in St. Vincent's downtown.
Love it.
I went to Oak Mountain High School, went through Jeffco, like a little bit of private school when I was really young, but Jeffco and Shelby Co. Growing up as a student. 18, graduated high school. A couple years before that, I thought that the military was probably a strong path for me. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do when I grow up, and I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right.
But going through that, I thought was a decent stepping stone. I had both of my grandfathers who, their legacies alone were encouraging to me. Both of my parents were military brats in their own right in very, extremely different capacities. And I think over time, it just rubbed off on me because I knew I wanted to go to a challenging school. I wanted to see if there was a way that I could propel what my future adult life would be by going into the military first. And I really wanted the opportunity to try to play college sports too. I played football the most growing up, and I really wanted to see if there's a chance for me to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But I wasn't any, big name or anything else like that. I wasn't going to go to like an SEC school to play. And eventually I got to the point where I was really considering some of the service academies the most. And I was lucky because West Point or Army was the one that took me. And I walked on there and played football there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I loved it. I was an Army officer afterward because I graduated West Point in 14.
Okay.
I was a full-time active duty Army officer in various places throughout the country and a couple of places internationally for 6.5 years.
Wow.
And then, so I did military school for 4 years, military officership for 6.5 years. And then technically I'm still an officer in the reserves. I'm a captain for a unit over in River Chase behind the AT&T building as an OCT, which is an operational controller trainer. And so I've been doing that for the past 3 years.
Okay. What does that entail? Like, is that like monthly meetings, or do you?
Yeah, sort of like monthly meetings. So basically the basic breakdown is 2 days out of the month. So one full weekend out of the month, you're working at your reserve center or a different kind of mission. But it can vary. So for instance, I was in the formerly Fort Gordon, now Fort Eisenhower area of Augusta, Georgia. I was doing a 3 or 4 day mission over there, helping train another unit with the military decision-making process. We did that for a few days in January. In February, I was here for 2 days. And then in a couple weeks, I'll be going to Nashville for 4 days.
Okay. So around a little bit, just southeast, I guess? Or
for the most part, I mean, I've done stuff that varies. I've gone out to the Houston area before with this unit. I've gone to Wisconsin before with this unit. It's mostly training capacities. So a lot of it is just trying to leverage branch immaterial subject matter expertise to try to make sure that other reserve units are flowing through their processes correctly to help with higher level staff functions. But I've done stuff kind of all over the place. So I'm currently an intelligence officer, and that's what I did at the end of my active duty time. But I mean, what I do right now is extremely part-time, very, very much part-time, true reservist. But I was an armor officer beforehand. So my experience has kind of been all over the place. Like when I first became a lieutenant, I went to armor school. We learned all about basically heavy combat arms and cavalry. And I was a tank platoon leader, and then a mortar platoon leader, and then an executive officer for and HHC, which is a headquarters company for a combined arms battalion. So it's just all over the place.
So you've seen some pretty cool equipment. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I've driven a Abrams tank before. I've shot an Abrams tank before. I've commanded an Abrams platoon before. So yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool. And where was that?
That was in I would say mostly Texas, but my time there was kind of split between some cool training missions in California, but South Korea and Texas. Like those are the two main.
South Korea?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get, I mean, we'll get to real estate later, but I want to hear like cool international stories. Like where all have you been? Where were you stationed?
Okay, yeah.
Cool...
So right out of the gate here, I mean, I was decently well traveled as a kid because I have a mom who's British, so that made it a little bit easier. Like we got used to traveling a little bit.
Yeah.
My dad liked traveling too. So it wasn't weird for me to go somewhere else necessarily. It wasn't like I'd never been outside of Alabama before.
Right.
But once I graduated high school, it was like, all right, well, I know like 2 people roughly that are at this school. So I went and made a ton of really good friends there, but everyone just disperses.
Yeah.
Everybody comes there and disperses from there, and you run into friends and maybe even people who feel like family on the outside in various different places. But that was in New York, about 50 miles north of the city, New York City. So I was in West Point, New York, and then after that, came back here because my wife Julie is from here as well. We had been dating since high school. We got married right after we both graduated, and then we packed up and went to Columbus, Georgia. Mm-hmm. We were there for a year, and then we went to Central Texas in what's now called the Fort Cavazos area, so like Harker Heights, Killeen, and we were there for 3 years. But I spent 2 months, probably 2 months total out of my time there in Poland, maybe 3 months total in California, and maybe about 9 months total. I remember in high school, she had known like before we started dating that she was going to go play softball at South Alabama because they recruit pretty young. And I did not know yet until like the beginning of my second semester of my senior year where I was going to go. Yeah. And we had recently started dating. And I remember coming up to her and I was like, hey, I was excited, but I knew that it would be bittersweet, right? Yeah. So I was like, hey, I got in. I got into West Point. And she was like, yay.
Yeah, I'm happy for you, but that's all my way.
Exactly. And everyone was like, yeah, it's not going to work. And then we just tried it. And here we are. We're celebrating 10 years of marriage this year. So
congrats. That's
awesome. Yeah, absolutely, man. But after that, that whole Texas time with some of my international travels too, we went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, which is really far south Arizona, like 13 miles away from the border.
Okay.
Gorgeous.
Really?
Beautiful. Probably my favorite place. Like wonderful outdoor scene. Mountain biking was incredible. Hiking, this, that, and the other. A lot of very remote, small town, probably declining population kind of a situation. But it was really fun. It was really fun. We were there for 8 months. And then...
What were you doing there?
I was at Intel school. So I had switched from Armor to Intel shortly after becoming a captain, from first lieutenant to captain. And then after that, we packed up ship again. And then we went to East Coast, Georgia, not too far from the Savannah area at Fort Stewart. And I was there as the targeting officer for 3rd Infantry Division for about 15 months until the back half of 2020. Julie and I decided to move back here.
Wow.
Yeah, so a bit of a journey. Our daughter, before she was 2, our daughter had lived in 4 different states.
How old is she now?
5.
She's 5. Wow.
That's right. That's right.
So she's, I mean, just like you, she's growing up. Yeah, I'm guessing y'all still travel a good bit, and she's just gonna have that kind of in her childhood as we travel.
Yeah, we took when she was 4 last year. We took her and at the time our 1-year-old son to England, and that was a trip.
Yeah, how was that flight with?
Ooh, it wasn't so bad because I was with Julie going over there. I mean, it was not the greatest, but it was doable.
Yeah.
But she had a horrible time coming back. Because I came back early and she came back with them. She had that's a whole nother story.
Man, I think that's good because in this business, we meet a lot of people, and it's, I grew up traveling. We've traveled a good bit as well. And just fortunate in that my family did that growing up, and Rachel and I kind of carried it on into our marriage. I run into a lot of people who, haven't left the country. Some haven't even really left the Southeast. Mm-hmm. And it's just like kind of normal for them. And it's like, I don't know, it's just like such a different world or a different mindset from what I'm used to here. When I hear that, I'm just like, wow, really? And it's like, no, like I've been like very fortunate in being able to do that. But then people get in that comfort zone of just, I don't want to. Like there is no desire. I'm like, man, like you just don't know you're messing. Like we got to get out there.
Yeah. And it's hard because you can't really, convince someone that they should be confident in an unfamiliar situation. They've never tasted it. And like you're saying, some people, they never really want to taste it. I think that there can be a detriment to it, because as much as you're at least not interested in exploring different parts of the world, especially different parts of our country, it's going to be hard to relate to people as much as you are in a people meeting organization, or you have that sort of capacity, like in your profession. You know, like you're going to come across people who are relocating from God knows where.
Right.
And if you've not heard of 75% of the places that you hear about, or you don't know what it's like, or you haven't seen it with your own eyes or met anybody else who's from there, it's going to be a lot harder for you to build a connection with that person. And I think it just makes the conversation a little bit less fun. Yeah. But I'm also, it's easy for me to say because I feel like I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to geography and human geography. Like I'll probably ask people too many questions beyond what they really want to answer. So I'm guilty of that too.
That's funny. So came back 2020. What was the transition? And did you know, like, man, I've just always loved mortgages? Like what?
No,
what did that? Yeah. What? So did you come back saying like, I don't know what I want? What was that transition?
Yeah. It was a really, really good question. So I did not know that I wanted to be in sales, financial services, anything like that at all. Like I actually thought that's probably where I was not going to go. My direction was not very locked in. I was thinking to myself, I don't know exactly what I want to do on the backside, right? But I know that I'm probably more recruitable and a little bit more well-trained coming out of my military time as what they call a junior military officer. And so I was reaching out to a lot of headhunting organizations, as they call them, like your Cameron Brooks and your Lucas Groups and your Orions and things like that. And they have a very strong track record of plugging in junior military officers with mid-level management positions all over the country. But typically they divert people or encourage people to seek out opportunities at mid-sized to larger-sized cities, to go work at Procter and Gamble and all kinds of different places.
Some more opportunities.
Right, that are looking for, people that are young and hungry but have a strong leadership background and are accredited through their education, this, that, and the other. And I remember talking to a few of these groups, and I was like, man, I want to be in Birmingham. And they're like, well, just like everybody else. They say, why? Why do you want to be in Birmingham? And I was like, well, family, connection. My wife wants to be there. We want to have another kid. We want to raise our family there. And we've lived enough places to really feel like that's where we want to go. Like we've tested it. It's not like
cool to say. Like literally living all over the world and saying like that's home for me. That speaks a lot.
And Birmingham certainly wouldn't have had the same draw if it wasn't our home. Right. Like that's our origin story, But we were like, okay, there's a way that we could make Birmingham happen that we might not be able to make happen in other places. And we like it enough, and it's not just the location, it's the people too, you know what I mean? And so that was absolutely huge for us. Like if either of us didn't like our family so much, maybe it would be a different story, right? But we were like, hey, we think that this is a good solution for us, and we tested it like we were talking about before. So I brought that up to some of these organizations, and they're like, well, we feel like Birmingham is, your destination. Right. But maybe there's somewhere in between. I was like, guys, I'm not
really trying to sell me.
I'm not joking. Like, I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. We want to be there rather soon. We don't want to pack up and move to another place and then pack up and move back to Birmingham. And the more I was really vying for that, the more I realized that it was going to be very difficult for me to find a job quickly that would allow me to continue to sustain my family and my family's lifestyle. And it's not like we were living like a very lavish lifestyle, but I had a decent salary as a military officer, a government salary with benefits, and I was about to flush that down the drain because of where we want to be. And, Julie was always very accommodating, but she was never in love with being an Army wife. Right. You know what I mean? That was never really her passion, and I also wanted to respect that. Like she was accommodating, she wanted to support my dreams, but I knew that like that's never really what she wanted, and especially as our kids got older, that would have been even more, I don't know, even less desired, I suppose. Yes. So we continued to talk about it, and I was like, well, what I'm learning, Julie, is that unless I take a job with a really massive pay cut, at least to start, I need to take some time and take some hits to grow in a new craft in an industry, and perhaps going like sales or commission is really where this path is leading. Are you okay with that? Like, are you comfortable with that? Because I didn't really think that sales was in my path. And she was like, do it. I was like, really? She's like, do it. I was like, you realize everything else that we would forsake to go down this road? And she's like, absolutely do it. And so I was scared. I was scared. I didn't know exactly where we were going to land. And so I ended up reaching out to the West Point Association of Graduates. They call it the AOG here for Birmingham and Central Alabama. And immediately I got a lot of good responses. And they were like, hey, like, let's talk about your resume. Let's coach you up. Let's set up some conversations that led to interviews. Some of them led to job opportunities, or at least felt like they were gearing up for job opportunities. And through those efforts, I was continuing to explore and talk to one of my best buds who grew up. His name is Eric. He lives down in the Orange Beach, Gulf Shores area, but he grew up here and went to John Carroll, same age as me. And I was like, hey, what do you think about all this? Because I know you know a lot of people. And he goes, I want you to talk to one of my best buds. He did my last mortgage, and he owns a mortgage company in the Birmingham area. His name is Turin. And I was like, okay, but I mean, I don't know jack about mortgages, and I don't know if that's something I'd be interested in. He goes, I'm not here to convince you of that. I'm here to convince you of him. So go talk to him. And I had no idea what I was doing. I picked up my phone and called him, and it was like, I don't know, it felt a little bit ordained. You know what I mean? Like he was like a really good homie, Southern, just Christian bro. If you could think about what that would sound like, that's him. And I told him my backgrounds and what I stood for and what I was looking for and what motivated me, and basically what I had done in my professional career up to this point, and why I'm even calling him. And I think it was the second conversation we had where he says, you go pass your test, I'll give you a job offer the next day. As a loan officer, not a processor or a loan officer assistant or as anything else.
Yeah.
Do it. And that's what we did, right? I went and I talked to him. I took my courses. I did this, that. I ended up taking my test, and I called him as soon as I left. I called him and I said, I passed, I'm good. And he goes, all right, we'll whip it up. You'll see. And so he sent it my way, and they gave me a seat at the table. And for that, I'll be forever grateful at Birmingham Mortgage Group. Absolutely love him and everyone else. You know, I say Turin because he was my first point of exposure, and he's sort of like a mortgage godfather to me. And I was with them for the better part of 2 years, just loving it and soaking up everything I could until I felt like the next gradual step for me was to kind of go out on my own. And so that's what I ended up doing, to try to go my own brand, kind of like what you were describing at the beginning of the conversation, just because I want to be an independent broker who is learning more about the wider scene, and to have more reach and everything else to help some of my military contacts, because I absolutely love VA lending, and that's been a hallmark of how I've built my business. So all in all, massively grateful for him and the team there. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And that's kind of how we started, is just friends of friends.
Yeah. And I love that. So when talk me through those first 2 years of building a business, because it's a lot. I mean, you're wearing every hat from CEO to finance to marketing. Well, what did that look like, and how'd you balance it?
Yeah. Well, I would first say I had a lot of help, right? So a lot of people who say you're doing things by yourself, very few people ever really doing everything by themselves. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's always some sort of at least a 2-person dance. So for me, I was learning the ropes. Like, I came in not understanding that to be a broker, and that means something different in the mortgage space than it does in a lot of other professions. It's a little bit more like the insurance, I would say. But to be a broker and to function in a brokering capacity only in the mortgage space, I didn't realize that a lot of people consider that to be a more challenging way of doing things. I literally did not know any better. So I came in, learned from some of the people who are the best of the best to coach me up on how to do it, with a really robust processing team, laid out processes for me to understand, okay, this is what I do when I do it. I was a little bit of a slow roller on marketing, not understanding quite how proactive I needed to be at the very, very beginning, because I had not heard of certain things before. And then one of my mentors or one of the shop owners would come in and say, like, hey, are you doing this, this, and this? I have no idea what you're talking about. Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. And they said, okay, well, let's stop everything you're doing right now. Let's break this down and let's coach you up, right? Because we had like shared and joint success. And what I loved there, that I have taken everywhere that I will go and where I'm at now, is that I really value transparency, right? And I feel like that's an overused word, but maybe the most valuable form of transparency is understanding the larger picture that is your organization and how money is made. Because if you can understand the profitable motives of the people involved, you know where to ask questions You can understand like where to put your efforts, not because, people only care about money, but there is an element of trusting how people make money and respecting their time. And so I think for me is understanding those relationships, understanding how good teams work, understanding how marketing develops, looking at many different styles of business development and how certain people sell, how other people build relationships, what works for some people, what doesn't work for others, what works for me, the good, bad, and the ugly, because a lot of the stuff that I've learned has been from like failure, from missed opportunity or just botched experiences or anything else like that. Yeah, like you said, trial and error. I could write a friggin' book about all the things that I have done wrong, right, that have made me a little bit better piece by piece. And I think that rolling with the punches is huge. I think learning how to take a no answer is huge, because a lot of salesmen like to say, like, I won't accept a no answer. Well, you don't decide that, right? Like, if someone never responds to you, guess what? That's a no answer. You can't make them say yes. And then learning how to tell people no is difficult, right? But learning how to do that with honesty, because there is a certain positive characteristic of honesty, even when it hurts, like, and you're talking about big money transactions when you're a mortgage broker, just like you would be if you're a financial advisor or a real estate professional, you know what I mean? And so for me, it was understanding how people not only branded, but how people spoke, like Neil Rackham's spin selling book, right? The needs payoff strategy that one of my West Point graduate friends had me looking into when he was thinking about having me come on his tech company, right? He had me read that book when I was going through my journey of trying to find my next solution, like my next career. And I think that understanding really, really basic sales strategies that are not your old bulldog ones, but ones that are literally honest. And I know it sounds silly, but there are a lot of sales strategies that just aren't. And trying to build relationships with people to the point where you and I are having a conversation right now. Like, people don't write about this in books.
Right.
So I think that looking at other people's experiences, trying vigorously to learn through them vicariously, but also embedding all the things that you don't want to think about anymore from your past experience that didn't go so well, and channeling into something that is motivating for you, and just keep rolling, right? Like keep rolling. When I came into it, it was a struggle getting into purchase. It was months before I could get into purchase business. The low hanging fruit at the time was an aggressive refinance market. So I was doing that to learn the ropes to size up into purchase business, and now it's like I'm rarely doing refinances, but they will come, right? Like that the dam will break and that will become a little bit more popular when the numbers present themselves. So understanding kind of those market moves as well, and then gathering more sources of information is huge, because when you're new to something, you just want to stay comfortable, kind of like never moving out of the Southeast. You know what I mean? Like you only want one news source and you want to hear things from one perspective, and you want that to be comfortable and nothing else. And now it's almost like I'm on the other end of the spectrum, where it's an oversaturation of information where I have to filter out where I'm going to devote my energy. And it's good because I'm listening to a larger market that is more national, that is more wholesale in its fashion, that I'm gathering multiple perspectives to make me a little bit better. And it's just learning through a fire hose in a way. I never thought that I would be in this position after a few years of practicing the business full time. I thought it would take a lot longer. And it's not so much about production or sales capacities or know-how, sale, none of that. It's really just about industry knowledge. Like I thought it would be so much harder to get to this level. But I've had some wonderful people who have coached me up and been willing to pour into me along the way. A lot of people who have done it out of the kindness of their heart, and not just because they thought they could, make money off of me. So it's been pleasant to see how many people you can surround yourself with that actually do have a good heart. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people think, all right, well, the more lucrative or sales specific an industry is, the less people are just good people. And that does happen. I don't want to make it sound like that doesn't happen. I felt like I've been in the Shark Tank many, many times, but I've been pleasantly surprised to see how many people think beyond that, and ethics prevail and relationships prevail more than just trying to make a buck.
Well, a lot of times those people are at the top, right? They're not the people trying to make a buck, the people that are actually genuinely trying to help people, right?
Because they know it lasts.
Right.
Like they're playing the long game.
That's the long, yes.
Right.
Yeah. So walk me through, what does it look like now? So I didn't have a good understanding of your business, but are you doing VA loans across the country?
Yeah. So I do, probably percentage-wise, like 98% of my business here in the metropolitan area.
Okay.
Just because that's kind of how I started growing the business, and That's where some of my relationships have developed. I mean, I'm sure can completely understand like how that can be so much stronger, like where you are at home, right? That's where you can plant the strongest seeds.
Yeah.
And it allows me to help and build those relationships, like you said. But I have some really strong relationships with people that are all over the place from my past military life. You know what I mean? So we have some of our best friends that we're representing right now for a VA loan in Maryland.
Okay.
I'm doing a deal right now in Texas, and I did one last year. I did 2 in Tennessee last year, and I helped one more Texas in the Sam Houston, the San Antonio area for a VA loan, and I did another friend of mine who's a few years younger than me and was starting his special forces training journey and needed to buy a home in North Carolina. So I helped him there. I helped a friend of a friend buy a VA home in Georgia. And then
do you have to be
people in Arizona?
Do you have to be licensed in each state, or how does that work?
You do. Residentially speaking, like for a residential mortgage transaction, you have to have your base license, so to speak, which has federal accreditation. And then you're more than likely going to pair that with your home state. So for me, like getting in at the very beginning was just my federal backed with Alabama, which had that same basic requirement. But then me doing these other states, I had to tack on additional education and licensure. So every time I want to do Georgia or Maryland, I have to add that. And then if I want to keep it alive every year, I have to renew that.
Okay.
So it has to be worth the cost.
Right. But as you go out and you see, hey, I've got there's a theme of people either going to Maryland or Georgia or Texas or Tennessee and saying, okay, well, it's worth the cost of getting and keeping my license there because it'll be not just a one-off.
That's right.
Kind of thing, yeah.
That's right. Because you can apply for, at least in my world, you can apply for the license rather quickly, but you don't want to be too far behind in that regard, because let's just say you wanted to do a deal in Nevada and you're like, hey, I need to lock my loan today. Well, there's going to be a compliance issue if I can get a license, in a day or two if I stay up all night and take my test, right? But if I lock your loan, like I lock the interest rate to protect it from getting worse, and then send disclosures, and then apply for my temporary authority with my pending license, that creates a compliance issue. So it helps a little bit to be on the front end of that. So like you're saying, you do kind of have to be on the front end of discerning whether or not you want that license ahead of time.
Right.
Because, if you're doing 98% of your business in one state, how many more do you want? And for me, it's like I do it as much to help friends who want me to represent them in other places. It's more of like, okay, what's regularly occurring with so many different forms of relationships in an area versus what is your onesie twosie direct to consumer? Like that, that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, I got you. Earlier you mentioned teams. Do you have a team? Are you still? Okay. Well, what does your team look like?
My team is small because it depends on what stage of the transaction you are in.
Okay.
But overall on the broker side, it's gonna be me and my processor. My main processor is Blake, and he is incredible. Right? Yeah, all the Blakes are good. My daughter's name is Blake. My processor.
That's right. Yeah.
But he's been doing it for 20 years. He's a giant teddy bear. He's so good at what he does, right? And I just think he's a good complement to my style of business. And I got plugged in with him right away. Like went out on my own. I was like, I need you like to be my rock. And he was like, I got you. Like I'm here for you. So having him is absolutely key.
Did you know him from previous business, or was it?
No, I met him in the new venture.
Okay.
Yeah, when I went on, and I wasn't even thinking about it on my own until he and his wife brought it up. Right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't think that it was possible to do it in the way that they advertise. I didn't think that I could do it that specific way. I thought I'd have to sacrifice too much of what I already held dear.
Right.
So when I found that, I really investigated it with, my former company. Like they were really accommodating and allowed me to investigate. And I was like, guys, this is what I'm thinking about. I need to dive in and see what this is. And eventually got to the point where I realized it was a better solution for me specifically in the direction I wanted to go. So I got plugged in with Blake, and he has been absolutely amazing. And for us, we're like a tag team going through all of our situations. And when we shop around and figure out what solution we want to go, right, we have different relationships depending on the solution, right? If I have somebody who has a really low credit score, but it's just over the brink. Like if it's a yes or no answer, it is yes, but it can be more difficult and more expensive. Maybe we go a certain route. If it's a VA loan, maybe we go a certain route. If it's a conventional loan, maybe we go a certain route. If it's a USDA or FHA loan, maybe we go a certain route. If time is priority, we go here. If price is a priority, we go here. Like we have a lot of different options available. So our team could look a little bit different depending on where we plug in the specific lending solution. to complement the borrower's needs and to get to the closing table.
I think that's so important that people don't understand is loans aren't one size fits all, right? And people say, well, I've got I'll throw Rocket Mortgage under the bus because no one likes them, is they're going to give me the best rate. They're advertising the best rate. It's like, but there's so much more to it than just the rate, right?
Yeah.
And what you just said is, hey, it could be a VA product, but inside that we could structure it how many different ways to make it make the most sense for you. And so
that's right.
Yeah. And so I think that's really important that you do that and that people just don't truly understand that it's not just that one big rate number, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And without going down what could be a giant rabbit hole, what almost everybody doesn't understand who doesn't do what you do or doesn't do what I do is that it's not just a rate on paper, because if you were to go onto any of these lending sites, any of them, and you look at what we call their teaser rates, like what they advertise, which you have to do that compliantly with certain things that go along with it. If you click on what is typically a drop-down arrow and you see the disclaimer, like what's going to be in that disclaimer language is something that when you really break it down is usually not that attractive, right? You might be looking at that thinking, okay, if I pay no extra money to get it, what's my 30-year rate on a conventional with a mediocre credit score? But they might be telling you, all right, well, this is a 15-year with $20,000 or 4 points or whatever for a specific loan size, and you have to have an 800 credit score, right? And exactly, it's going to be the buy down. So I say all that because most people don't understand that a rate always has a price. Now, a rate could have a negative price, which means money back to you. It could be really close to zero, which of course is nothing, or it could have a positive price, which means that the borrower is paying to get it. And you're seeing that a lot right now. So when you look at these national reporting mechanisms, like if you look at Mortgage News Daily, if you look at any of your lending sites, if you look at NerdWallet, I mean, whatever your internet news source is, if you look at that and they say, hey, average 30-day rates right now for a conventional loan might be, I don't know, a 6.8. I'm just going to throw something out there. So if they happen to be a 6.8 today, right, that's going to be an average captured within a certain amount of time, but that does not actually capture APR-related cost, the cost of the interest rate. It is what people land on. So if you have somebody who throws $30,000 toward the rate price because they are so infatuated with having a lower payment, that's going to go on the books as a 6 point whatever or 5 point whatever. So and then if somebody wants to get money back, they might take a 7 something. And so all of that comes in and you're going to, like you said, have a skewed number. So what people don't understand is what the average rate shows is not the average payment in closing costs for the buy down, because it's all the same thing to get that rate. Every rate has a cost, right? So if you're going to look into it, you want to understand what that cost is, especially for your aggressive shoppers out there.
Right.
Like, what's the rate cost?
Yeah.
I mean, that tells you literally everything.
Yeah. Well, and depending on what your goals are, like you said, someone who has cash but just wants that lowest monthly payment, throw some money at it, buy it down, and get that lowest monthly payment. But someone who maybe they have cash or they don't have cash, they want to keep it, then you could do the opposite, right?
Exactly. And then people are trying to budget refinance timelines, which makes it progressively more complicated, but more fun, in my opinion. So like you can weigh that into it. At the end of the day, it's always a gamble. It's just what gamble are you going to make?
Right.
Because people want to say, I either want it to be a gamble or not a gamble. I mean, it always is some sort of gamble because you're always jeopardizing one thing to